last time out, we talked about the visionary and democratic styles with John. So today we're going to try and dig a bit deeper into some more of the styles. So I've got Greg with me today to help me along the way. So today we're talking about the pace-setting and coaching styles. Greg, why those?
Very good question. The pace setting is the most, in all of the work that we do, when we work with leaders, when we work with organizations, I'd say that the pace setting style is the most commonly observed that we come across. And I'd say that the coaching style is perhaps one of the most impactful, but the least observed style that we come across. So I think it's a good idea today to focus on the most common and the least common and see how they interact.
So why is the pace-setting style so common, and what's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it per se. There are some elephant traps and pitfalls about using it. But I'd say one of the reasons, or some of the reasons that it's the most common, is that's often how people are measured. So you can imagine, if you like, the superhuman boss who's the most driven individual, who wants to deliver the best work, arrives first in the morning, leaves the office last thing in the evening, always present. And of course, that, whether it's a he or a she, they want to drive the performance because that's what he or she are measured on. Their bonus might depend upon it. They want to deliver performance constantly. And that sort of thing is propagates this idea of the pace setting leader. I'd say that's probably the reasons behind it.
So what's the problems with that? I mean, I can remember having a boss once that I got on really well with, but there was always a competition for who'd get into the car park first between the two of us.
Yeah, very good. What, in the morning or in the evening?
In the morning.
Right, okay.
And at the time I had kids and he didn't, so it really was a bit of an unfair competition.
So yeah, this was the first to get into the office in the morning, not the first to leave in the evening. It's good to that's great. No, actually, if you have a really engaged team, if you have a really highly motivated team, you can move mountains using the pace setting style. You can really apply. And if you're working either to the end of the month figures or you need to deliver a project to a deadline or something like that, then the pace setting style is absolutely brilliant. But it's got some drawbacks. I mean, one of the drawbacks, for example, is that imagine you've got the hamster in the wheel. And actually, the pace setting style is all about getting that hamster to run faster. So you think about the impact on culture in an organization. And because you're just getting the hamster to run faster, it can stifle creativity. It can stifle innovation because you're doing what you usually do, but faster, instead of just taking a pause, taking a step back and think, is there a smarter way of doing this? So you can imagine, if you've got an aircraft, you've got the internal combustion engine going at full throttle, and stepping back and thinking, actually, it would be a better idea if we took the internal combustion engine out and put the jet engine in. That's the sort of thing that the pace setting style will often stifle.
So how do you avoid those sorts of pitfalls? Because I can imagine that leads to burnout as well as lack of innovation and people becoming disillusioned and just feeling they're on a hamster wheel. So what are the ways of avoiding that?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right when you use that burnout word, Danielle. And it's not only burnout for the team, but it's burnout for the boss too, because inevitably something has got to give. The pace setting style is one of these styles which is highly effective, providing there are peaks and troughs. And if you don't have peaks and troughs, so if you don't have some troughs of activity to relieve the peaks, then that's when the consequences really come in. The key to it is that social awareness, and in particular, I want to mention this word empathy, because empathy is one of those behaviors, one of those traits that is present in so many of the 6 leadership styles. And if you don't have empathy, when you're a pace-setting leader, then you won't begin to notice when people are getting stressed, when they're getting burnt out. And of course, the next step there is people realizing, do you know what? I've got a family that I haven't seen in ages. My mental health or my physical health is beginning to suffer. And then they'll start actually leaving the back of the pack. You'll lose them and they'll begin to either go elsewhere or just check out. And of course, if that happens, then the performance of the team, the performance of the organization will suffer, and you'll begin to lose really talented people.
So how does the leader get around this? How do they avoid it? I mean, empathy is part of it, but we mentioned at the beginning we were going to talk about the coaching style, and you said it was one of the least used. So how does that play in?
You know, it's if you have any default style at all, the coaching style is a really good one to nurture and foster in yourself. The great thing about the coaching style is that it builds engagement, it builds a learning organization, it actually relieves the leader so that the leader doesn't get burnt out of many of the decisions, the tasks, the pressure of pushing all the time productivity. What it does is it aligns people's personal goals, personal values, personal desire to learn with that of the organization. So suddenly you begin to get people in the team coming up with ideas, coming up with innovation, coming up with things that could be done better. And providing that they're all aligned to the vision, actually they stop bothering the boss about decisions and escalating problems because they're capable of dealing with it themselves.
So what are some of your top tips for how to start to use the coaching style to get the most out of people? Because if you say it's not very often used, one imagines that there are some drawbacks to getting to use it. So what would your top tips for how to start to use it be?
Okay, so the reason that it's one of the least observed is because then it needs an initial investment of time. It's very easy, whether you're a pace setting or a commanding style leader, with somebody comes to you with a problem, to answer the problem, and you feel the hero, and they go away. But what you've created is you've created some dependency on you. So the coaching style is not training all leaders to be coaches like you, as an ICF qualified coach, would know as being a coach. It's not about sitting down with your team for a 90-minute session and going deep into things. It's more about having coaching style conversations. And one of the best ways of beginning to do that is maybe to become familiar with the GROW model. The G is the goal, the R is the reality, the O is the options of what you could be doing, and the will is what you will do. If you want to really look into that a bit more deeply, I would certainly recommend reading Sir John Whitmore's book, Coaching for Performance, or even better still, go on a leadership program where you explore all of the 6 different leadership styles of Goldman. And one of the things that we do in our development programs is to focus very much on the coaching style of leadership. And personally, I don't believe in role plays. So I get the people on our programs to come along with real-time issues in their workplace. And in triads, we have them working with each other. So you take time as being the coach, you take time being coached with your issue, and then we put a third person will act as observer and feedback at the end of the session. So at the end, what you're able to do is to deploy the GROW model in such a swift way that when you're at the water cooler with somebody and they happen to mention that they've got this particular challenge or that particular challenge, you can quickly run through that model and actually you can unlock their issue for them so they can go away and they can crack on and get it done. The brilliant thing about the coaching model is, or the coaching style of leadership, is what you're doing is you're raising awareness of what the challenge is. So if you think about it this way, that in raising the awareness, what you're doing is you're improving the quality of the input, so the quality of the output improves. Very simple. The other key thing is not only that you're that you're building awareness, but actually the responsibility for delivery remains with the individual. So what they're not doing is parking the monkeys on your back, so that you're free to put in your excellent thinking. It gives you headspace to think more strategically, develop your own career, whilst they're developing their own learning at the same time.
And you're right, that you can do it in a couple of minutes at the water cooler, rather than saying, oh, John, you've got this problem, here's the fix. You just say to them, okay, so what have you thought about for fixing this issue, and what other options might there be? So it could be as simple as a couple of questions like that, asking the what and the hows, and rather than just telling them and giving them an answer.
Yeah, you've hit upon something there, Danielle. It's all around pulling. It's all about asking those open questions to get the solutions out that the individual really has, but they've just not necessarily explored it before. There's something else that you need to distinguish as well. And many people think that the coaching style is asking somebody to do something nicely. You know, the head on the side saying, you wouldn't mind doing this for me, would you? And they think that that's the coaching style. Actually, it's not. It's telling somebody what to do, but in a kind of a nice way. And that's very different from being really quite robust and challenging, if you like, but you need this empathy at the same time to explore how the individual, what options they could take and how they could possibly do it. Because more often than not, you'll find that they actually do have the answer. They just need to go through the process of crystallizing what that activity might be.
And the interesting thing I've noticed so often is that actually, when the person is articulating their challenge for you as a third party to understand, they hear themselves differently from when it's just noise inside their heads.
Yeah, well, I've got great examples. I've got one particular individual in a client that we were working with a few years ago. And by her own confession, she was a very directive leader. She was actually a commanding style leader. And I know the commanding style is one of those other styles that we're going to be talking about in one of our other episodes. But what she found was that her department wasn't coming up with the goods, and she was losing sleep, she was losing all of that sort of stuff. And over the course of the program, she transitioned to becoming a coaching style leader. And suddenly she got her evenings back, she got her weekends back, her team were coming up with ideas. But more importantly, and this is something that we haven't specifically spoken about today, the productivity of her team increased by 30%. And she was able to measure that 30%, but it increased productivity by 30%. It more than paid for the program that she went on. In fact, there was something like a 6 times return on investment for the program, just by one of those individuals changing their leadership style, and that was delivered over the course of a year.
That's great, Greg. So I just really want to outline briefly for our listeners how LeaderShape Global can help if you're looking at these different leadership styles and how you might develop them. And one way is by using the LeaderShape app, which you can find on the App Store or the Play Store. And they will identify your own perspective on your strengths and development needs as a leader. But of course, that's just your own perspective. But you could perhaps also explore the possibility for being coached or joining our new open program, which is coming up soon. If you're really keen to become the best, most agile and effective leader you can, why don't you reach out to me or any of my colleagues on www.leadershapeglobal.com/our team. All our contact details are on those pages, and we'd all be happy to help. So thank you, Greg, and I look forward to talking to you again about other styles next time.
Thank you, Danielle. A real pleasure.